Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, this is segment 1 on a 2-video series on how to replace these bias pots in your Muzishare X7. Now, again, this isn't like a mandatory thing. I do feel like that the way they mount the bias pots in a Muzishare is probably why I haven't seen any fail. So it's not like the R8 where I've seen the pots fail and it take out the output tubes and the resistors and, cause a bunch of damage inside. Haven't seen that personally on an X7, and I haven't heard people talking about that. And I really think it could be down to that they're mounting the bias pots by their shafts with a nut, the way they're designed, versus what Wilsonton did, and that they're just kind of hanging in there by the solder lugs on the bottom, and that's what's supporting them. And when you go in there and you're kind of wiggling around trying to find the screwdriver slot, you're wiggling the bias pot around on its solder lugs, and that's what causes them to fail. That's just me guessing, given that one amp they fail, this one they don't. So I really like the way that they solidly mount these, but the big bonus with replacing them is you can get these longer shaft ones where they stick up just a little hair above the top of the chassis where you can see the end of the shaft. And so instead of fishing down in a hole, trying to find the screwdriver slot, you can see it. It's super easy to adjust the bias. And so that in itself to me is worth doing. And installing these military spec bias pots, you're never going to have a problem with losing the bias in the tube red plating and damaging the inside of the amp. Also feel like that one of the things that is kind of a must do is replacing that big 10 ohm cathode resistor with a small half-watt precision, like I get 0.01 or maybe they're 0.1%, precision resistor, so you know that you're getting the same bias on all 4 tubes, because that does lower the distortion in the amp to have the tubes biased identically. And so that's definitely something I recommend doing. But yeah, the bias pots, probably you could do it or not do it. If this seems too hard of a thing to do, you could skip this part. I highly recommend, if you're inside one of these amps, installing these test point little jack things. And as you can see from this distance, you can't even see them. They're just, black. They kind of blend in with the amp. But it does give you a measuring point for the bias if and when the meter quits working or these switches get weird. And so if you're going inside one of these things, or you're having a repair shop go inside it, show them this video or explain to them how to do this. And then I show in the video, but I'll explain it too here. These jacks are drilled with a 1/4 inch drill, 17 millimeters from the edge, or 11/16 of an inch. And this metal's easy to drill. You don't have to worry about that. It's not going to chip or that kind of thing. And so it's easy to do, to drill these holes in the top. It goes through like this piece, and then there's another thinner piece of metal below it, and it's through the meat of that too, so you don't get on the edge of it and have some weird problem. So they're really easy to install. This is a highly recommended upgrade. If you don't do anything else to this amp, put these jacks in it, change those cathode resistors to half-watt in case something does happen with the bias pot. It doesn't melt the inside of the amplifier. Also, when you're working on one of these, I've learned, put some tape over the top of these transformers like this. This clear coat scratches super easy. If you're drilling holes, there's like metal chips on your bench or on the little towel you're working on. It'll keep from scratching them up and keep them looking nice. So anyway, let's jump into replacing the bias pots in this Muzishare X7. So the first step in replacing these potentiometers is to remove the pair together. They're mounted on the same little metal strip. And I like disconnecting the colored wire on the tag strip end so that we know which wire goes where when we're putting it back together. And highly recommend use your phone or something, taking a picture of everything so when you go to put it back together, you're not like, ooh, where did that come from, right? So next thing I'm going to do is remove this white wire like that, and then remove that white wire. Okay. Then I'm going to come in here and remove these two screws. Now there'll be some washers. I've had this removed from the amp before when I was looking at the pots and making sure which ones I wanted to order. So we don't have to deal with the washers, but make sure you don't lose all these little washers when you put it back together, or make sure you put them all back, because they do help keep it secure and, you know, stable in the chassis. So then the next wire is, we got this little black guy right here, and we just heat that up, and there we go. And then we're going to have to remove these pair of resistors, so we might as well get rid of those. We will be reusing that. And now we're ready to take this pair of potentiometers to the bench and replace them with those new military spec ones. Okay, so let's swap in the new potentiometers. First thing we do is you take off this little clinch nut there. You loosen these up with pliers or something like that. And you take this nut off. And then save this washer. And actually we'll swap them one at a time just to keep this simple. So one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be removing these little tabs. So we're going to take our Dremel tool and knock those off. And we're doing this to make sure we have room to put this little test jack right next to the potentiometer. And it's just an abundance of caution, plus we don't need them. They're really not doing anything except just being in the way. So we got those little guys removed, and we have our new potentiometer here. And if you look at it closely, you'll see that there are two little tabs. There's one right there, and then there's another one right there. One of these will fit into this existing little slot there, but we need to make a place for the other one to index into. And so we're going to take our same little cutoff wheel and we're going to cut a little groove in this part right here for that other tab to index into. And you don't want to cut all the way through. You want to cut about halfway through, like that. And now we have a place for both of those little tabs to index into so that it can't rotate. So, the next thing we need to do is get this board removed off of the back of the old potentiometer. First thing you want to do is cut these pins off as flush as you can. And then we're going to put some tension on the back side of this board, like pulling, like trying to twist it in this direction. And then at the same time, heat that joint up and you'll feel the board move. And we're just going to use this same technique to walk our way around this circuit board until we get the circuit board removed from the back of this potentiometer. It might take heating the pins several times. You see see how we're getting a nice gap there? And then it's tight on this side, so we're going to work this side up. And you can see we're just kind of walking it off those pins. Like that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the board over like this. It's going to be kind of hard to show you, but I come in from the back side and heat the solder up and then blow through this hole to like blow the solder out of the hole so we get 3 open holes. Now you could use a soldering wick, you could do a toothpick. There's several tricks you can do, but I found just heating it up and blowing through it. Just be careful you don't burn your lips or get it too close to the circuit board. And as you can see, we got 3 nice open holes. So the next thing you need to do, now they do make this type of potentiometer that has pins instead of these little eyes. I've never seen any for sale. I mean, the manufacturer lists them in their data sheet, but you probably have to special order like 100 of them. And so we're using this type with these little tabs on it, or these little solder lugs. And what I do is I come in here and I, with some flush cutting nippers, I split that little solder tab. Like that. Then I come in with some pliers and gently squeeze them together. Like that. And it makes something that'll fit through those little holes and will be solderable as a pin instead of a solder lug. And like I said, just be gentle. This is some pretty brittle kind of material. It's be real easy to break those off. So this is the wiper that goes to the grid, and then these are the 2 ends of the potentiometer. And same thing on this board. Those are the 2 ends, and that's the wiper. You do want to make sure that you don't have any. There was a little solder bridge in that. So make sure that after you've cleaned these holes out, you don't have any solder bridging any of this. And check both sides, and we're all good. I don't know if you could see that before. There was a little tiny piece of solder bridge in that, which would obviously cause a major problem. So now, and it's going to take a little bit of kind of careful wiggling around to get these 3 terminals to go through the holes in the circuit board. You might have to bend them over a little bit, Again, be gentle with these things because this phosphor bronze or whatever these things are made out of are pretty brittle. If you get rough with them, you will definitely break them off. And that one there wasn't cooperating. Try that again. Like I said, it takes a little bit of finessing to get all three of them to go through these holes. And there we go. See, we got them all three through the hole. And then the next thing is find something like, I'm just using these pair of scissors to hold this up and come in here and solder this guy in place. Make sure you heat it good enough where it's flowing onto the pin and the circuit board so you get a good solid connection. And there we go. We have our circuit board soldered to the back of our potentiometer. So now we're going to put it back on, and it's going to end up being twisted a little bit from where the other one was, but that's fine. And like I said, you line up these two little tab slots that we've put in place, and then I take the old washer and work it down over that shaft, and then put the little lock nut, and then get our new nut. Throw it down, and then before you tighten it up, make sure that these little tabs are in that groove and that we're in that groove like that, and then tighten it down. You do want to look and make sure that this is flush in here and that this little tab isn't sitting on top of there so it's sitting crooked. And you can see it's sitting nice and flush, because this does have some length to it, and if this thing's at an angle, then this shaft won't go through the top of the hole in the chassis, and you'll end up with problems with that. So let me do this other one, and then we'll install them back into the chassis. So here's our assembly with the two new mil-spec potentiometers that have longer shafts here that will extend out the top of the chassis, which will make adjusting the bias so much easier. You might want to like reflow or heat up this solder joint and twist these wires around so they come out forward instead of coming out like way over here at this angle. Just make it a little easier and a little cleaner install. Like I said, these boards are going to be a little rotated from where they were originally, but that doesn't matter. Now if you're doing this on an R8, soldering these pots onto the board is critical because they mount on the board instead of having this piece of metal like this Muzishare has. The board's longer, it has both pots on it as well as the coupling caps, and the centering of these through the top of the chassis is related to their angle on the board. On this one, it's got these individual little circular boards. They can be a little crooked, doesn't matter. It has nothing to do. All it's doing is holding the few components that this amp uses, a couple of resistors in place. So actually, I think this is a much better design that it's actually holding the potentiometers by their bodies instead of, you know, them being located with their solder tabs and, you know, potentially, you know, wobbling around on those little solder tabs and causing issues whether you're using, you know, the original ones or these. I have found that the R8s seem to have more problem with these potentiometers than the Muzishare, and this could be why, that they're mounting them with the shafts like they're supposed to be instead of mounting them with the solder terminals, which weren't designed as a mount for these potentiometers. So anyway, next I need to drill the holes in the top of the chassis for the test jack points, and I think this is a long enough video already, so we're going to stop here and wrap it up at this point and get back to that amp in the next video. So I decided to break this up into 2 videos, try to keep these from being too long, and I hope that doesn't look too complicated to do, and I hope I showed that in enough detail where you'll feel comfortable doing this yourself. And I will put in the description below the Mauser link. I hate doing that because that link's probably going to change. They may run out of those pots, you know, and you have to sub it with something else. And if you have to get something that's, you know, it's a 22K pot, if you have to get a 25K or a 20K, not going to make any difference. You know, I wouldn't drop down to like a 10K. I would stay in that 20 to 25K range so you don't end up with anything screwy going on. And I haven't done this personally, but if I owned one of these, I might try to figure out how to play with those resistor values so that you could bias these for EL34 tubes. And if any of you guys have one of these amps and you want to try using EL34 tubes, that's how you would do it, is playing with the resistor that goes to that black wire or the resistors on either side of the pot, and that's how you can kind of shift the range that the pot adjusts in. I'm not going to go into trying to figure that out for you. That's on you if you want to do it, but that's how you would do it to get the grid voltage in the range that would make an EL34 tube work in this amp, which obviously is not outside the realm of possibility to be doing. It doesn't have a switch like the R8 to switch between the two, which is a kind of a bonus feature on the R8. I personally still think this is a better amp. So anyway, we're going to wrap up this video here. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please subscribe. Please like the video. Thanks to you folks that regularly watch my channel and otherwise support Skunkie Designs. And until the next video, have a nice day.